Welcome to our deep dive.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah. Into the world of Machado de Assis.
Yeah.
Machado de Assis. Born in Rio de Janeiro in 1839, this
Wow.
mixed-race kid rose through society to become,
It's amazing.
yeah, the literary giant of Brazil.
Of Brazil.
And we've got...
I'm so excited for this one.
Yeah, me too. We've got a stack of fascinating material to explore.
Lay it on me.
All right, so we've got literary criticism, excerpts from novels like the posthumous memoirs of Brás Cubas.
The classic.
And Memorial de Airs.
Another one.
Yeah, and analysis of his style.
Of course.
And even some philosophical connections.
Oh, it's going to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's particularly interesting is that we're not just trying to understand what he wrote, but how his writing reflects and critiques the society he lived in.
That's what makes him so fascinating. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we'll be uncovering his social commentary,
Yeah.
that distinct narrative style of his,
I love that.
and even some of the philosophical ideas that he weaves into his work.
I can't wait.
And by the end,
Okay.
you'll understand why Machado de Assis is still considered a literary master today.
And why he's often mentioned alongside other great writers who explored the depths of the human condition,
Yeah.
like Dostoevsky,
Right.
even though their approaches were vastly different.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's jump right in with the posthumous memoirs of Brás Cubas.
Let's do it.
This book starts with a dedication that kind of throws you for a loop.
Okay.
He dedicates it to the worm that first gnawed at the main character's corpse.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, talk about dark humor.
Wow, that's intense.
It is.
So that dedication really sets the tone for the entire novel, I think.
Yeah.
Remember, the story is told by Brás Cubas, but he's narrating from beyond the grave.
Right?
And that's what we mean when we talk about a dead author narrator. It allows Machado de Assis to have Brás Cubas look back on his life and the society he lived in with this detached, almost cynical sense of irony.
It's like he's got nothing to lose. So he's brutally honest about everything and everyone, including himself.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's how Machado de Assis becomes such a sharp social critic.
Yeah.
Through Brás Cubas, he dissects the vanities, hypocrisies,
Yeah.
and even the ridiculousness of the Brazilian elite in the 19th century.
Right.
He makes you laugh, but he also forces you to confront some uncomfortable truths about social structures.
No.
Okay.
Another book we're looking at is Memorial de Res. And one thing that struck me is the contrast in setting between the two novels.
Interesting.
In Memoirs, Brás Cubas is all about those public spaces of Rio de Janeiro. He's chasing after pleasures, trying to make a name for himself.
Right.
But in Memorial de Airs, the focus shifts to more intimate settings. Homes, gardens, offices.
Yes. I find that shift really fascinating.
Yeah.
It's almost like Machado de Assis is signaling an evolution,
Okay.
not just in his writing style, but also in the way he's exploring his characters' inner lives. The focus on private spaces in Memorial de Airs allows for a deeper dive into their thoughts, their relationships, their personal struggles.
And both novels feature Rio de Janeiro itself as a character, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
It's not just a backdrop, it's this living, breathing entity
Right.
that reflects the social and political transformations happening in Brazil at the time.
Yeah, like Rio becomes this mirror to the complexities of Brazilian society.
Yeah.
You see the city changing, modernizing, and that reflects the changes happening within the characters themselves.
And speaking of complexities,
Okay.
let's talk about how Machado de Assis depicts love and marriage.
Right.
He doesn't exactly paint a rosy picture, does he?
Not at all.
No.
He often portrays relationships that are driven by self-interest,
Right.
social pressures, convenience, things like ambition, social climbing,
Yeah.
or even just financial security,
Right.
rather than genuine affection.
It's like he's peeled back that romantic facade to show the sometimes harsh realities underneath. Like in Memoirs, Brás Cubas has a whole string of relationships.
Okay.
And none of them seem particularly deep or fulfilling.
Right.
He even puts a price tag on his love for Marcela,
Oh, wow.
saying she loved him for 15 months and 11 contos de reis.
He did not.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Basically reducing their entire affair to a financial transaction.
That's pretty harsh.
Yeah.
While I agree that it's a rather cynical observation, it's classic Machado de Assis.
It is.
He's not afraid to expose the less than noble motivations that can sometimes drive human relationships.
But even amidst all this cynicism,
Yeah.
there's Virgilia,
Okay.
also from Memoirs.
Yes.
She's this fascinating character who dares to seek love and fulfillment outside the confines of marriage.
Wow.
Which was pretty audacious for a woman in 19th century Brazil.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Virgilia's story highlights a key theme in Machado de Assis' work: the limited options available to women in that society. Marriage was often the only path to social and financial security.
Right.
And Virgilia, despite her boldness, is still caught within those constraints.
Right.
Her desires are in constant conflict with societal expectations.
Yeah.
Making her a deeply tragic figure, in my opinion.
And this is where Machado de Assis' use of irony becomes so brilliant.
He's the master.
He wields it like a weapon.
Yes.
To dissect the hypocrisy of the bourgeoisie and make us question everything we think we know about these characters and their motivations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A great example of that is the scene in Memoirs where Marcella pretends to reject a valuable necklace.
Oh, okay.
On the surface, it seems like she's being noble.
Right.
But her true intention, her desire for material wealth, is subtly revealed through her actions.
I see.
Machado de Assis doesn't tell us she's being manipulative.
Right.
He shows us.
He's like he's playing this game with the reader.
Exactly.
He's constantly challenging us to read between the lines.
Yeah.
To look beyond the surface and question what's really going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what makes his work so engaging.
Right.
You have to actively participate in the storytelling process.
Right.
Constantly deciphering his subtle hints and double meanings.
Yeah, okay.
So we've got this dead author narrator, this razor-sharp social commentary, and these complex, often messy portrayals of love and relationships.
Right.
But what about the philosophical side of things?
Well, Machado de Assis was deeply influenced by positivism, which was a philosophical movement that emphasized science and reason. But unlike some positivists, he didn't reject religion outright. He used it as a lens to explore existential questions and critique religious hypocrisy, much like Dostoevsky did in his own work.
That's right. And like Dostoevsky, he wasn't afraid to delve into the darker aspects of human nature. Right. He was fascinated by our contradictions. Our capacity for both great love and profound selfishness.
Yeah.
But there's also a distinct Brazilian flavor to his writing.
Yes.
That characteristic ironic twist that sets him apart.
I think that's a perfect segue into our next topic. This concept of humanitism that shows up in the posthumous memoirs.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So humanitism, it's actually the brainchild of this eccentric character named Quincus Borba.
Oh, okay.
It's essentially a theory of survival of the fittest, but applied to human relationships and social dynamics.
Okay, so how does that actually play out in the novel?
Well, Quincus Borba argues that to be is to prevail.
To be is to prevail.
In other words, success, power, and influence are the ultimate measures of a person's worth. It's like when Brás Cubas inherits a fortune from his godfather. And suddenly finds himself surrounded by people who want to be his friend.
I see.
Machado de Assis makes us question
whether that success actually makes him a better person.
That's such a cynical but strangely compelling idea.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider the context of 19th century Brazil with all its social hierarchies and power struggles.
Exactly. And what makes humanitism so fascinating is that it's presented with this deadpan seriousness that makes it even funnier. It's like Machado de Assis is holding up a mirror to society. Saying, look, this absurd philosophy perfectly captures how people actually behave.
It's satire.
Yeah.
But it's also a way of exploring some pretty profound questions about morality.
Exactly. Yeah.
If to be is to prevail, then where do things like compassion, empathy, and altruism fit in?
Precisely. Machado de Assis is challenging us to think critically about the values that underpin society. He's forcing us to confront the possibility that maybe we're not as civilized and enlightened as we like to think we are. And he does it in a way that's both thought-provoking and wildly entertaining.
This ties back to something you mentioned earlier, the influence of positivism on Machado de Assis' thinking. Positivism was all about science and reason. But you said that Machado de Assis didn't completely reject religion. How does that play into his work?
You're right to point that out. I think his relationship with religion is actually much more complex. He uses it to explore existential questions. Not just to critique hypocrisy. You see this in the way his characters grapple with faith, doubt, and the search for meaning in a world that often feels chaotic and absurd.
So he's using religion as a way to explore the big questions about life and death, purpose and meaning.
Exactly. And he does it with that characteristic subtle irony.
Right.
Never giving you easy answers or telling you what to believe.
Okay.
He's inviting you to join him on this journey of exploration, to wrestle with these questions alongside his characters.
And speaking of exploration, one thing that really struck me about Machado de Assis's writing is his masterful use of language.
Oh, absolutely.
How does he create that signature ironic style? It's like he's speaking in code sometimes.
Well, he's a master of ambiguity.
Okay.
He layers his narratives with double meanings and hidden implications.
Okay.
He'll often present an idea or a character in a seemingly straightforward way. But then he'll undermine it with a subtle turn of phrase.
Right.
A carefully placed detail that makes you question everything you thought you knew.
It's like he's constantly winking at the reader, saying, don't take anything at face value.
Exactly. And that's what makes his work so rewarding.
Right.
It demands your active participation as a reader. You have to be constantly on the lookout for those subtle clues, those shifts in tone, those moments where he's playing with your expectations.
That reminds me of something we touched on earlier. The contrast between the posthumous memoirs and Memorial de Air.
Yes.
The shift to more intimate settings in Memorial de Airs seems to coincide with a more nuanced and introspective narrative style.
That's a great observation.
Yeah.
It's almost as if by shifting his focus to these private spaces.
Right.
Machado de Assis is also allowing his language to become more subtle.
Okay.
More suggestive. More attuned to the complexities of his characters' inner lives.
It's like he's inviting us to eavesdrop on their most private thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
And that requires a different kind of writing, a more delicate touch.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the reasons why Memorial de Airs is often considered to be a more mature and sophisticated work than the posthumous memoirs.
Right.
It's not just the themes and the characters that have evolved.
Right.
It's also the writing itself.
Okay, so we've talked about this dead author narrator, the sharp social critique, the complex relationships, the philosophical underpinnings, and the masterful use of language. But how does all of this come together to create the Machado de Assis we know and love today?
I think it's the way he manages to blend all of these elements. Humor, irony, social commentary, philosophical depth, into a cohesive whole. He's not just entertaining us. He's making us think, making us question, making us see the world in a new and often unsettling way.
And he's doing it with a style that's uniquely his own.
Absolutely.
But we haven't really talked about his influences.
Okay.
Were there any other writers who shaped his approach to storytelling?
Oh, absolutely. He was a voracious reader.
Yeah.
And deeply knowledgeable about both classical and contemporary literature. And that shows up in his work in really interesting ways.
Okay.
For example, he was heavily influenced by Lawrence Sterne, the author of Tristram Shandy.
Lawrence Sterne.
Okay.
Now, Tristram Shandy is known for being experimental and digressive, kind of all over the place. What aspects of that do we actually see in Machado de Assis's writing?
Well, think about how Machado de Assis breaks the fourth wall in the posthumous memoirs.
Okay.
Brás Cubas is constantly addressing you, the reader, directly.
Right.
He comments on the writing process, jumps around in time, and even makes fun of his own characters.
Right.
That playfulness with narrative structure.
Okay.
That self-awareness. That's very much inspired by Sterne.
So it's like Machado de Assis is taking this experimental style and making it his own.
Exactly.
Adding that Brazilian flair and ironic sensibility.
He's not just imitating, he's transforming.
Okay.
And it's not just Sterne either.
Yeah.
You can find traces of Shakespeare, Cervantes, the Romantic poets, all filtered through Machado de Assis's unique lens.
Right.
For example, remember when Brás Cubas compares himself to Hamlet pondering life and death?
Oh, yeah.
That's Machado de Assis winking at us, showing how literature is this ongoing conversation across time and cultures.
It's like he's weaving together all these different threads of literary tradition to create something entirely new and original.
I think that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And that's what makes reading Machado de Assis so rewarding.
Right.
You're not just passively consuming a story.
Right.
You're actively engaging with a rich tapestry of literary and cultural references.
Yeah.
It's like He's challenging you to become a literary detective.
Okay.
To uncover all the hidden layers of meaning.
We talked earlier about the concept of humanitism.
Yes.
That survival of the fittest philosophy espoused by Quincus Borba. Do you think there's a connection between humanitism and Machado de Assis's use of intertextuality?
Interesting question.
Yeah.
They both seem to deal with this idea of borrowing, adapting, and transforming existing ideas to create something new.
Right.
That's an insightful connection.
Yeah.
I think you're onto something there. In a way, intertextuality itself could be seen as a kind of literary humanitism.
Okay.
Authors are constantly drawing,
Yeah.
competing with, and building upon the works of those who came before them.
Yeah.
It's a kind of intellectual ecosystem where the strongest ideas survive and evolve.
So maybe Machado de Assis is using intertextuality not just as a stylistic device,
Right.
but also as a way to comment on this broader process of cultural evolution and the struggle for ideas to survive and thrive.
I think that's a really interesting interpretation.
Yeah.
It adds another layer of complexity to his work, and it shows how deeply he was engaging with these ideas about progress, competition, and the nature of human society.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in our deep dive into Machado de Assis.
We have.
We've talked about his innovative use of a dead author narrator,
Right.
his sharp social commentary, his complex and often cynical portrayal of love and relationships, the philosophical underpinnings of his work, and his masterful use of language and intertextuality.
Lots to unpack.
What stands out to you as the most important takeaway for our listeners?
For me, it's the enduring power of his narrative voice.
Yeah.
That detached, ironic perspective allows him to be both a sharp social critic and a compassionate observer of the human condition.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
He can make you laugh at our follies while simultaneously prompting you to reflect on the deeper truths of human experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He manages to walk that tightrope between cynicism and empathy.
Yeah.
And he does it with such wit and intelligence.
He makes you want to reread his work again and again, constantly discovering new layers of meaning.
Right, and that's what makes him such a relevant and rewarding writer to engage with, even today.
Yeah.
He may have died in 1908.
Wow, so long ago.
I know.
Yeah.
But his insights into human nature,
the
complexities of relationships, and the absurdities of society are timeless.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, here's a final thought to ponder.
Sure.
We've talked about how Machado de Assis uses intertextuality to engage in this conversation with other writers and literary traditions.
Right.
But what if we take that a step further?
Okay.
What if humanitism, this seemingly absurd philosophy, is itself a kind of intertextual reference?
Interesting.
Could it be a way for Machado de Assis to satirize not just the ideas of his time, but also the very act of borrowing and adapting ideas from others? We encourage you to explore that question and see where it leads you in your understanding of this brilliant and endlessly fascinating writer. Until next time, keep diving deep.